Hello, thank you for watching my channel today. My name is Sarah and my channel is called Your True Shelf. Today I'm making what might be deemed a little bit more of an unusual video because I wanted to talk about, can there be any sort of downsides to reading? Can reading actually not be good for you sometimes? So this might seem strange because I'm on Booktube. I love reading. Reading is like my biggest hobby. My office is full of books. Bookshops feel like the friendliest places in the world. We all know that feeling of just hanging out with books and feeling comforted by that, by going into a bookshop or a library. And so why could it ever not be a good thing? But the reason I wanted to talk about this is because recently I have not been going through the best of times, and because of that, I think some things have just felt more difficult than they would normally. And sometimes books can be a bit of a pressure. So there's two different sort of thought processes that I was going through here. So one is when book things like TBRs and stuff can make me feel stressed and take away enjoyment from what should be an enjoyable hobby. And the other thing is like specific books themselves. So if I talk about the first part first, so the bit about the sort of the circumstances. So I'm sure like most people, my life is quite a busy life a lot of the time. Like I have quite a very intense job, and I've got two fairly small children, and you know, we all have all of those kind of, you know, different for different people depending on where you are in your life and stuff, but we all have things that we have in our lives which kind of can add pressure of things we have to do and stresses and that kind of thing. And sometimes we all know on Booktube we love a challenge, we love a TBR, we love read-alongs, we love all of those kind of things that are part of Booktube, and I think a lot of us are sort of serial overcommitters, and most of the time that's fine, but some of the times it turns into another thing on my to-do list and takes pleasure out of reading. So for instance, I made a video a few months ago now where I'd kind of got a ridiculous number of library books, and I was feeling quite stressed about reading the library books because I wanted to read the books on my own shelves, but I did want to read the library books as well. And my friend Jo, who I met through Booktube, is going to get lots of love in this video because she said to me then, the way I solved that problem was, she said to me, choose 5 of the library books, send the rest back. And she's really quite pragmatic about it. So I was like, okay, so I did. That got rid of the library book problem. And I did read most, I think all or nearly all of the 5 that I chose of the library books, and now I am not letting it get to that situation again. Then also so at the moment I'm doing the Dickens read along, and I have really enjoyed doing the Dickens read along and I want to continue, but because there's a book either every month or every 2 months, then I've listened to all of them on audio so far, and some of the audio books are now coming up to the like 40-hour mark, which is obviously very long. You know, that's kind of like 4 normal audio books. And sometimes I felt like I was listening to Dickens virtually constantly, because when I'd finish one, I might have time for one audio book that isn't Dickens before I go back to him again. And it was just feeling a little bit of a pressure because sometimes I'm not in the mood for that book. And I am the kind of person where if I say I'll do something, I find it really hard not to do it, not to complete it. And because of that, I sort of was just carrying on with each one. And I don't want this to sound like at all a criticism of the read-along, because it's really not. And I think it's a brilliant read-along. But Jo said to me, why don't you just give yourself a bit of a break, and if you want to miss a month, you can always read that book later, you can always watch the discussion video later, but you could have a 2-month break if you wanted to and catch up with that book another time. And I just thought, yes, it was almost like she gave me permission to do what I needed to do, which sounds silly, like I'm a grown person. But like I said before, if I commit to something, I find it really hard to break the commitment. And so I think when I feel like I need to, it might not be this month, but if I feel like I need to have a break and listen to some different audiobooks, then I will. And I won't feel bad about it. And then the other thing is, so I made a TBR for March, and I've done quite well on that TBR. But then also the women's prize list came out, which I obviously knew that was going to come out. And I always say, I'm not going to try and read all the books. And then I watch everyone else doing their videos about what they're excited about, which books they've got, which books they've read and everything. And I get really excited. And then I order loads in the library, and then they start coming in. And obviously they've all got a big waiting list, so you can't renew them. And then I'm thinking like, oh, I've committed to doing this, or that or the other with my TBR or with a buddy read or different things that I enjoy doing. And then when am I going to find time to read the books from the library? And then I start getting stressed again. And I appreciate the fact that this might seem very like first world problems, and I'm not trying to sound like if this is all I've got to worry about in life, I'm doing really well. Because I do have bigger things to worry about in life. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is when you have like quite a lot of stress in life, you need to assess where you can reduce stress. And at the end of the day, I don't want my favourite hobby to become something I have to do on my to-do list, do I? And I just want this to be about recognising when you need to give yourself a break, when certain choices that you've made are making things harder, and you need to just be able to let go of those choices. So that's kind of my message to myself and also to anyone who can kind of relate to what I'm saying. And yeah, so again, I was talking to Jo about this, and she said, like, you know, take pressure off the long list again, wait till the short list comes out if you want, and maybe focus on the books on the short list. So yeah, I have taken the pressure off. I DNF'd one of the long list books of the day. This is another theme, DNFing, because in the past I was terrible at DNFing. I'm still not that great at it, but when I'm reading a book which I am not enjoying, I need to give it up now. I just need to. This is just silly. And yeah, so I was reading Pod by Lillian Paul, and I wasn't getting into it. I wasn't getting joy from it, and when I had a look at some of the Goodreads reviews, it talked a lot about how traumatic it was, and I was like, I don't really need something really traumatic at the moment, and I'm going to give it up. No regrets. And then actually, interestingly, when I watched the Women's Plod Along live this morning, the hosts had loads of comments saying people had given up that book. So I'm not the only one. And yeah, so that was the sort of the first part that I wanted to say. And then the second part I wanted to say was about specific books. So I had a little flick through previous books that I've read, because I am quite a sensitive person, and I find that if I'm not careful, like the emotions of and feelings of other people quite easily rub off on me, and I have to be really careful of that at work. And I sort of it feels a bit different at work because it's in my job, but the mood of a book can affect my mood. And I asked Jo, this is like a whole praise Jo video. I asked her, do you like, if you're reading a really difficult book, does it bring you down sometimes? Like, the emotions of the books affect your mood? And she said for her, it's the other way around. So for her, she chooses books based on her mood rather than the mood of the books affecting her mood. And I was like, that's a much healthier way around to be. And how many times every single year do I say I want to mood read more? And then things like the overcommitments take over, so I lose out on the chance to mood read. So anyway, I thought I'd look at some books which I found have been difficult for me to read, and then also some books which I know are like really comforting to read, just so that I can sort of make a point of what I'm trying to say. So the most depressing book I can ever remember reading is Madame Bovary by Flaubert. Now, this book is still on my shelves only because, one, it's a cloth-bound classic and it looks pretty, and also my daughter gave it to me on Mother's Day. Like, honestly, didn't she gave it to me for my 32nd birthday? So she didn't choose it. Like, obviously, my husband chose it on her behalf. But it's so bloody depressing. It's like Madame Bovary is depressed and she spends the whole part of the book that I read telling us all how depressed she is and how it's so depressing and everything's so miserable. And I was like, I can't do this. I really can't do this. This is making me feel crap. And I DNF'd, and I'm really glad I DNF'd. But I think looking at the bookmark, I got quite a way through, but I'm glad I DNF'd. So that's an example. And a couple of examples that I have felt recently-ish that have made me feel a bit crap. So I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel, which I read for the Women's Prize. Really kind of unlikable protagonist. They're supposed to be unlikable, but their attitude kind of just makes me feel a bit not great. And so I think what makes this doesn't mean that I shouldn't or can't read books that have difficult themes, because, for instance, last month I read Beloved and I read Nightcrawling, which were both absolutely amazing. And I think when I talked about those books and people have commented to say, like, you could kind of feel the emotion that I felt reading those books whilst I reviewed the books, and they didn't drag me down, those books, because I think if a book has a sense of hope and growth in it, then it doesn't mean that I'm reading it and feeling more and more traumatised. So if I'm learning, if I'm enjoying the writing, if I'm feeling like hope, if I'm feeling that the characters are on a journey and all that kind of stuff, it will bring me through the book in a positive way. So it doesn't mean that I can only read like books which are really happy with happy endings. It doesn't mean that at all. But if it's a book where the character is unpleasant and they don't really seem to have much stuff that's actually adding to my life, that's what I want. I want something that's adding to my life. If it's not adding to my life in any way, if their characters are unlikable, if I don't agree with not if I don't agree with them, that's not really what I mean. If I find their actions don't really have a purpose in the story and stuff, then it's not going to make me feel good. It's not going to make me feel anything positive, basically. So that's kind of examples. But then I have some examples of books where they are traumatic, but they were great books. Like, for instance, the two I just mentioned. Also, Know My Name by Chanel Miller covers sexual assault and rape. Obviously a massively traumatic theme, but Chanel was so impressive and wonderful and a wonderful, wonderful person that reading her story, she made me feel in the best way. She made me feel like what she felt, but in a way where it was adding extra to my life and giving, like, I was feeling a lot of empathy and relating to like stuff that women have to deal with, and it was adding to my life. It was a positive experience to read. There was also The Girl with the Loud Voice, which was my second favourite book of last year. Again, covers a lot of traumatic themes, but Adoni, our protagonist, was this ray of hope, ray of sunshine, and determined, powerful young women in this book. And so it really like brought the book into my heart rather than making me feel traumatized. So they're like examples of how I can read difficult themes but not feel brought down by them. Things that I know that will comfort me. So I have a few examples. So this is one of my favourite books of all time, which is Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. This does again cover some difficult themes. It's a big book. I just have I love this book so much that I can remember very specifically one period of time where I was going through like burnout at work, and it was a really hard time, and the kids were really young, and I can remember having a lot of anxiety, and one afternoon when I wasn't at work, I felt like I couldn't really cope with anything, but I started listening to this for the second time on audio and just doing some like cross stitch at the same time. And I can remember how much comfort this book brought me. And this book, if I need a comfort read, I will keep rereading this book, because it just gives me that comfort and love from a book. Then there's sort of a bit more like frivolous books. So for instance, I haven't read this one yet, but Katie Ford is a writer of contemporary women's fiction. The books are in no way literary. They have quite common themes throughout. There's normally a love story, there's normally a big house, there's normally like a new fresh start in life, but I never ever feel like I haven't had a good experience reading her books. So I feel very like these are a hug in a book. They're very uplifting, happy things happen. They're not going to win the Booker Prize, but that doesn't matter because that's not what they're trying to do. And I think a lot of the time these aren't even 5-star reads, they're probably 4-star reads, but I just know that I can... Oh, I've got a tangle in my hair. I just know that I can pick them up and feel joy. And it's an easy read that I'll breeze through and it will be comforting for me. So there's also like the kind of books like this, like Giovanna Fletcher, like the kind of books that give you that cosy, easy, not a challenge feel. So that's those. And then a couple of other examples. So there's non-fiction. So for instance, this book, which is The Wisdom of Sundays by Oprah Winfrey. Anyone who has watched me for a while knows that Oprah Winfrey is like my idol. I love her so much. And this is a collection of different guests that she's had on her Super Soul Sunday program and podcast. And I never fail to get comfort and wisdom and anything like that from Oprah. And you can see how much I've tabbed this book, and if all I do is open to a random page and just reread something, let's just do that to prove my point. So for instance, I've just opened it on Caroline Mace, who's a wonderful teacher to me. These are the parts I've underlined. So she says, if you saw everything about your life as a learning, as a lesson, ask, I'm looking for truth, does this drain power? Am I empowering? With every choice I make, I'm either choosing to grace somebody or withhold it, to give power or take it back. If people understand that with every single choice, I'm either going to learn something from this or I'm not. So Oprah says, so in every day, in the smallest ways and the largest ways, we're either giving ourselves power or taking away from it. And Caroline says, you're not put in a position to betray yourself. You don't betray yourself anymore. You're not put in a position where you feel like you have to negotiate your sense of integrity, which is an act of betrayal. You don't feel like you have to compromise who you are. You know, because you don't feel like this isn't costing me my power. This isn't costing me my psyche. This isn't costing me my soul. I don't feel confused on some deep level. I'm not drained. I can be tired after a day's work, but I'm not psychically drained where I feel like I'm losing life. So basically, one of the things that she says is for every choice that you make, you should ask yourself, is this adding something to my life or is this taking something away? And that's a really good lesson, even for me now, just like from what I was talking about earlier. When I make a choice about a book, I should be thinking, is this adding something or taking something away? And I think I actually said earlier, I want books that will add something to my life. So this was a very apt page to open it on. And then another book that I know brought me comfort and I'd like to reread is this book, which is Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. And this is a non-fiction book about Morrie, who was one of the professors of Mitch Albom's at university. And when he's dying, Mitch goes and spends every Tuesday with him. And talks about different life lessons, and one of the things that I always think back to about this book was where Morrie was thinking like how he'd just like to be able to go outside and see the sky one more time. And it always makes me just stop and think, because as a person who can go outside whenever I want to, It's like a privilege to be able to go outside and see the sky whenever I want to, yet a privilege that's taken for granted most of the time. And when you are in like when you have a limited illness like he does, like Maury does, just those tiny things can bring so much joy. And I think that books that make you stop and remember those kind of things are really special books. And so again, there's a balance here. I don't necessarily need to read something profound every time I read a book, but getting those kind of lessons from books I really love. And so it's a balance between the books that are really deep and emotional but make me feel something here, and then books which aren't necessarily deep or emotional sometimes, but they're cozy to read and they give you some joy on a different level. So in summary, what I would like to say is, number one, I need to think about my commitments, and I need to give myself permission to withdraw from a commitment if it's too much, or if it's turning reading, again, not from a joyful hobby that I have, to a stress in my life, because nobody wants reading to be a stress. That's just silly. And I want to read the books that add something to my life, not take something from my life. Whether that means then DNFing books or picking books that I know resonate with what I want to read at that time, rather than what I feel like I should read at that time because of the pressure thing again. So that's kind of the summary I want to put across. So I hope this makes sense. I don't know whether anyone else can relate to what I'm saying. If you can, I'd love to hear your experiences and ways that you feel that you've overcome any challenges that you might have found with reading. What are the kind of books that make you feel like helps you through tricky times, or makes you feel like that joy inside when you read them? And conversely, if there's any books that have made you struggle, then let me know those as well. But I just thought it'd be interesting to talk about this. It's something that I don't think I've seen anyone else talk about before. But yeah, let me know what you think, and I hope you're having a lovely week, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.